Welcome to Wide Angle.
Thank you, it's good being with you.
What do you make of what you just saw? Put the film into context for us.
Well, I think it reveals the depth of the emotional attachment to Shiism within Iran. And I think that's very interesting because most people in the West look at Iran and they think of the country as being ruled by a theocracy, but a population that has become secular and has become anti-regime and has disaffected with Islam. And that's not the picture that we see. We see enormous amount of attachment and emotion with the core values of Shiism, and particularly with the myth of Karbala. Mm-hmm. And in the film, I was particularly amazed and interested in seeing this associated with the social class in Iran that you often associate with secularism. Kamran was, I think, a fascinating example of the complexity of Iranian society. A former revolutionary guard, extremely pious, at least at the folk level religion attachment to a shrine. And yet look at his mother, look at his fiancée. His fiancée is sitting in front of cameramen without head cover. He's wearing Western makeup, and his mother is telling you that Kamran likes to wrestle with a dog, a little puppy. For any pious Muslim household, a dog is an impure taboo that tells you that people don't probably pray in that house.
Right.
And, so we cannot say that, is he secular? Is he the kind of Iranian youth that the West constantly speaks of? Or is he one of the fanatical people who voted for Ahmadinejad? Iranian people cannot be simply compartmentalized into fanatical pro-theocracy religious people and then secular pro-Western Democrats. It's not that simple.
Well, let's talk about the religion in a little bit more detail. What are the main differences between Sunni and Shia Muslims?
Well, this is the most important sectarian division within Islam. If you were to look at a Christian parallel, it would be something like the Catholic-Protestant division. In Islam, it happened very early on. They separated paths over who should succeed Prophet Muhammad.
And Sunnis are in the majority.
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about Shia-Sunni division, we're not talking about equal numbers in the Muslim world. The Shiites are at best about 15% of the world's 1.3 billion Muslims.
Talk a little bit about whether most Americans understand the divisions between Sunni and Shia Islam, and is it even important?
It matters now because Iraq has opened the gate. The Shiites have got power in Iraq. The shrine cities of Iraq have opened up. There is connection now between Iraqi Shias, Iranian Shias, Saudi Shias, Pakistani Shias, Lebanese Shias. And the way in which the struggle for power in Iraq has collapsed into a Sunni-Shia power rivalry is now affecting the whole Middle East. We're seeing governments in the Arab world speak sectarian language. We saw the King of Jordan talk about the Shia Crescent.
Were you surprised that King Abdullah said something like that?
I was surprised at how quickly he saw the Shias as a threat. I mean, I think he was correct in identifying that Iraq had changed everything. But I was surprised at how quickly he saw this as a threat.
Do you think that the Sunni elites in countries like Saudi, for instance, have anything to fear from the Shia revival?
Saudi Arabia in particular does, for two reasons. One is that it is probably the most anti-Shia of all the Sunni countries. It has a Shia minority of about 15% that live in the oil-rich eastern province. They have literally no power in that country. For a very long time, we're not even allowed to call their mosques mosques. They are treated as heretics in many ways. So the Saudis greatly worried about what does Iraq mean for the Shia-Sunni relations within the kingdom. If they gave more power to the Shias, they have to deal with the hardline Sunnis in their midst. If they don't give power to the Shias, how are they going to contain them given the fact that the Middle East has changed? Secondly, Saudi Arabia and Iran, now for over 2 decades, have been rivals. They both have claims to being the leaders of the Muslim world, one as a Shia country, one as a Sunni country. And across the Arab world in particular, Shias, whether they're majority or minority, have not enjoyed a seat at the table. And they want a seat at the table. And Iraq has provided that expectation.
Well, let's talk about US foreign policy in the region. You have said that the Shia revival could present Washington policymakers with a real opportunity to pursue its interests in the region.
I think to a good extent that moment is past. That moment passed in 2006 by and large. It wanted to follow a different policy in Iraq. The US began to distance itself from the Shias and began to try to woo the Sunnis into laying down their arms. And as a result, a rift began to open When the war in Iraq happened, regardless of who instigated the war, the US had by and large, if not the goodwill, at least the tacit support of Iraqi Shias. They didn't resist the US. They didn't join the insurgency. They participated wholeheartedly in elections in Iraq. They supported the US. And the Shias across the region did so. In Iran, between 2003 and 2005, you still had a reformist president, who at least in 2003 made a peace offer to the United States, an offer of a comprehensive negotiations over a host of issues. The US did not take advantage of that opening, did not use that occasion to create an opening with Iran.
What does it want from Iran? What do you think the United States wants?
Well, the United States has a host of things it wants from Iran. It wants, most obviously, to suspend its nuclear program. It wants it to extricate itself from Iraq. It wants it to stop meddling in the Palestinian issue and stop supporting Hezbollah. And then there are those in the West who want basically the Iranian government to dismantle and to go away.
Some people suspect that the overall US policy to put pressure on Iran is just a prelude to military engagement of some sort or another. What do you think about that?
I think there is a chance for a military conflict between US and Iran, either a premeditated attack on Iran to take out Iran's nuclear sites, or that you might have an escalation as a consequence of the tensions between the two out of a place like Iraq. The problem is that a conflict will actually destabilize the region far more and will not serve what the United States and the West want from Iran. In other words, attack on Iran would only solidify the position of the Iranian government within Iran, and it's likely to take away any incentives it has to play by the rules of the game, maintain the diplomatic relations that it has with its neighbors, and it may very well retaliate by escalating support for Hezbollah and Hamas, as well as for militias within Iraq itself.
And so if it's not military confrontation, how do you work towards some kind of solution without people dying?
Well, there has been no dialogue between US and Iran recently. I mean, whenever you have a 2-minute conversation over orange juice between an American ambassador and an Iranian representative making world headline news, you know there's no dialogue. But ultimately, the task of managing Iran is probably the single biggest challenge for US and European foreign policy in the coming years.
So in your opinion, what would the correct approach be then?
Well, we're stuck between a stone and a hard place. Iranians look at the public mood in the US or the Congress and calculate that the American people really don't have the stomach for another major conflict. That the United States already has 150,000 troops in Iraq and may well have to put additional troops in there. And then there is Afghanistan looming on the horizon. That the US at best can strike Iran. It cannot invade Iran. And that gives the Iranian leadership a lot more breathing room. They didn't think like this in 2003 because America's military power was untested. We didn't know whether it was capable of actually carrying out a successful regime change or not. On the other hand, there are things that we want from Iran and we legitimately should want from Iran, namely that it should not pursue a nuclear weapons program.
Well, you know what the Iranians say, that they're not pursuing a nuclear weapons program. It's all about energy.
At some point, there is a will within Iran to have nuclear weapons capability, if not nuclear weapons itself. In fact, many Iranians may look at Japan as a model. Mm-hmm. One screwdriver short of a bomb. You have the capability, you have the knowledge, but you don't build it. So you remain within the international norm. It doesn't matter what the Iranians say or don't say. The question is, can we get them to change their behavior on a host of issues? If coercive capability is limited, there is no point in us continuously relying on it. We have to adopt a broader set of tools to influence Iranian behavior. We cannot, at the current moment, force Iran to do what we want.
Do we have those tools within our arsenal?
We do. The other tools are diplomacy. The other tools is the fact that the current Iranian leadership, because it has no relationship with the United States, has nothing to gain from a relationship with the United States or from preserving that relationship with the United States. Iranians assume that the United States is only interested in regime change. It doesn't want to talk with Iran because it doesn't want to legitimate the Iranian government, which means that it wants the Iranian government to go. If that's the case, then what's the point in conceding to the US? The other important issue for us is that what comes after an attack on Iran? Since 2001, what we should have learned is that the greatest threat to the West does not come from rogue regimes per se. It comes from no regimes. We have been hurt by areas of the world which are failed states or don't have governments. It was Afghanistan that hurt the US, ultimately, not Iraq. And therefore, an Iran that falls apart because of a massive military campaign will be a far greater danger to the region than it is today. I mean, Iran without a government, a territory the size of Iran, with 70 million people, with the amount of weapons, nuclear material, its geostrategic location, would only destabilize Saudi Arabia, Persian Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan, Central Asia, and the Caucasus.
That's a total doomsday scenario, isn't it?
It is, but it is something we need to think about because we often think about the military punishment of Iran in a unidimensional way. Namely, you either do what we want or what the international community wants, or you pay the consequences. But there is also a set of consequences to the consequences that we will visit on Iran. Namely, we have to be prepared to deal with the post-conflict Iran. If we're unsuccessful in war, we're going to deal with a belligerent, radical, vindictive Iran. If we're successful in destabilizing and dismantling this regime, what comes next? I mean, we should have learned from Iraq that regime change is not that, dictators leave out of one door and Democrats come in out of the next one. We're going to be dealing with a messy Iran that may well make Iraq look like child's play.
Professor Vali Nasser, thank you very much for joining us on Wide Angle.
Thank you for inviting me.